Section 1. Confession. Section 1. God the great creator of all things doth uphold, direct, dispose, and govern all creatures, actions, and things, from the greatest even to the least, by his most wise and holy providence, according to his infallible foreknowledge, and the free and immutable counsel of his own will, to the praise of the glory of his wisdom, power, justice, goodness, and mercy. Introduction. This section of the Confession teaches, 1. That God, who created all things, also sustains them in being, 2. That he exercises over them complete control, 3. That this control regards all creatures and their actions as well as events in the natural world, 4. That absolute control effects the execution of God's fixed plan, and 5. That all this has as its end the manifestation of the glory of God. Questions. 1. There are two errors ruled out by this section of the Confession. The first teaches that things happen by The second teaches that things happen by 2. With which of these errors are the Armenian in, perhaps unconscious, agreement? 3. Cite a scripture text which proves that the will of man is not unpredictable. 4. What scriptural teaching about God helps us to understand why there are some things that man cannot do? 5. Why is there no chance that an unconverted man will do the will of God, or that a converted man will not begin to do the will of God? 6. What is the difference between fate and divine sovereignty? 7. What teachings of Scripture aid us in believing that God controls everything? 8. Cite a scripture text to prove that God controls everything. Sections 2 to 7. Confession. Section 2. Although, in relation to the foreknowledge and decree of God, the first cause, all things come to pass immutably and infallibly, yet, by the same providence, he ordereth them to fall out, according to the nature of second causes, either necessarily, freely, or contingently. Section 3. God, in his ordinary providence, maketh use of means, yet is free to work without, above, and against them, at his pleasure. Section 4. The almighty power, unsearchable wisdom, and infinite goodness of God so far manifest themselves in his providence, that it extended itself even to the first fall, and all other sins of angels and men, and that not by a bare permission, but such as hath joined with it a most wise and powerful bounding, and otherwise ordering, and governing of them, in a manifold dispensation, to his own holy ends. Yet so, as the sinfulness thereof proceedeth only from the creature, and not from God, who, being most holy and righteous, neither is nor can be the author or approver of sin. Section 5. The most wise, righteous, and gracious God doth oftentimes leave, for a season, his own children to manifold temptations, and the corruption of their own hearts, to chastise them for their former sins, or to discover unto them the hidden strength of corruption and deceitfulness of their hearts, that they may be humbled, and to raise them to a more close and constant dependence for their support upon himself, and to make them more watchful against all future occasions of sin, and for sundry other just and holy ends. Section 6. As for those wicked and ungodly men whom God, as a righteous judge, for former sins, doth blind and harden, from them he not only withholdeth his grace whereby they might have been enlightened in their understandings, and wrought upon in their hearts, but sometimes also withdraweth the gifts which they had, and exposeth them to such objects as their corruption make occasion of sin, and, withal, gives them over to their own lusts, the temptations of the world, and the power of Satan, whereby it comes to pass that they harden themselves, even under those means which God useth for the softening of others. Section 7. as the providence of God doth, in general, reach to all creatures, so, after a most special manner, it taketh care of his church, and disposeth all things to the good thereof. Introduction. These sections of the Confession are directed against certain erroneous inferences which men have drawn from the doctrine stated in section 1 of this chapter. Here we are taught, 1. That God's absolute sovereignty does not destroy the integrity of man's liberty, 2. That it does not deny the operation of second cause, 3. That God is, however, free to overrule these laws and causes, when he pleases, 4. That God ordered even the fall of man without himself doing any evil, and 5. That God's sovereignty extends even to the inward operations of men's hearts, in both the saved and the lost, without participation in sin. Questions. 1. Name the common objections to the doctrine of absolute sovereignty. 2. Refute same. 3. Why does the elect sometimes sin so grievously? 4. Why does the reprobate sometimes act better than we might expect them to? 5. Is it correct to speak of a Christian as both an old and new man? 6. Is a Christian responsible for the sin he does under the influence of the remnants of his old nature? 7. Does Figure 2 imply that some acts which we do are entirely sinless and that others are entirely sinful, that is, without alleviation? 8. Explain and harmonize Paul's statements in Romans 7 verse 20 and 7:24. 9. Why is the final section of this chapter of the Confession important?